Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Getting Started with OnAir Company tutorial. So in the previous video we had a quick summary of what all these options do. Now it's time for us to actually get down and get our first aircraft and perform our first flight. So we're going to go and we're going to do the aircraft market. So we have a tip down here that's saying go to the aircraft market to get your first aircraft. We could have also chosen the option up here, or we could go to World Aircraft Market. I'm going to use the tip here, so I'm going to click the aircraft market button, and up comes the aircraft market in a moment. This might take a second because there's an awful lot of aircraft it has to get from the database, but it should take too long. Once it does that, we're presented with this list. Now, we have the option here to search. We can filter by which simulator we're working with, and we can turn on and off affordable aircraft. So if I untick that, it will show things that are incredibly expensive that I cannot afford. If I tick that, it will only show things that are within my affordable price range. Now, obviously, as a starting company, I don't have 10 million. The reason it's showing this is because I could potentially afford to rent or lease one. However, what I'm going to use is the search for the aircraft I have loaded in my simulator option. So I'm going to quickly now switch over to Microsoft Flight Simulator. And here we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I'm going to go to the profile option, and I'm going to go to my hangar. Now, this is an option that's only really available in Microsoft Flight Simulator. In XPlane or FSX or something like that, you're going to have to actually load an aircraft up at an airport to do this. Unfortunately, it's just down to the way that the simulators function. Microsoft Flight Simulator has the advantage of when you're choosing something from the hangar, it counts as a loaded aircraft, and OnAir can detect that. So it's an easy way for us to do this. So right now, you can see that I have this BA 146-300 loaded, but obviously I don't want to start with that because it's far too expensive for a starting company. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to change aircraft, and I'm going to go for, say, the G36. There we go, Beechcraft Bonanza G36. I'm going to select this, and if I go to my liveries, I have a nice little OnAir livery that was created. And I can sit in the cockpit, I can look around, as you likely know. However, now that that's loaded in the simulator's hangar, I can go back to OnAir. And in OnAir, I can hit search for the aircraft I have loaded in my simulator. It will detect that G36 is there. So it says Bonanza G36 here, and it brings up the information on the right-hand side. And I can see some details about this aircraft. So I can see that its class is SEPL, and if I point to that, it does pop up and say that stands for single engine piston land. So it's got one engine, it's a piston engine rather than a turboprop or a jet, and it's a land aircraft. It's not designed to land on the water. Amphibious classed as land as well, or sometimes classed as sea, but if an aircraft can only land on the water, it will be, see, in this instance it would say SEPS because it's only a sea aircraft. The fuel type, so we can see that it uses 100 low lead, which is standard avgas. We can see how much fuel it has maximum and how much that weighs in pounds. We can see how much fuel it uses per hour in gallons or per pounds. We can see its range. This assumes a full tank of fuel, so we can see it flies for about 4.4 hours, which is about 774 nautical miles. We can see its empty weight in pounds. We can see its maximum payload. Now, this is the maximum useful payload, so this is the crew plus any passengers plus any cargo is the maximum it can carry. Be careful with this value though, because most aircraft, the amount of payload does not necessarily match with the maximum gross weight, which is shown on the right here. So we can see that empty, it's 2,600 pounds. That's with no passengers, no crew, no cargo, and no fuel. Its maximum allowable weight is 3,650 pounds. But it could carry 1,000 pounds of cargo, and it could carry 480 pounds of fuel. So if I was to have 480 pounds on top of this 2,600, a full tank of fuel, that would leave us at 3,080 pounds. Now, 3,080 pounds taken away from 3,650 pounds max weight means that we're only allowed 660 pounds of payload, which is obviously much less than this max payload. So we have to be careful about whether we're going to take a full tank of fuel and still expect to achieve our maximum payload. This is true of a lot of aircraft. It's particularly noticeable in some of the large aircraft as well. So people will sometimes say, oh, well, why does it have such a crazy range? And it's because those aircraft do have that range, but they can't carry any passengers when they carry that much fuel. So most airliners are based on having as much passenger and cargo on board rather than on having as much fuel on board as they can carry. So when you see, oh, this thing can only do 5,000 miles in reality, and then it's saying on air that it can do 10, 11,000, it's because it can do 10 or 11,000 if it has a full fuel, but it won't be able to carry many passengers. Right, we can see our design cruise speed here is 176 knots because the Bonanza is fairly quick for a single engine prop, and its VS0 is 61 knots. That's basically its stall speed, so the slowest it can go and still stay in the air. Right, it's minimum airport size, so it's designed to take off from very small runways, so it's a size 0. We have a tick box that says, does it need a co-pilot? Now in this case it's a small aircraft, it's not required to have 2 pilots, therefore that's not ticked. And then we can see max seats. So if we had eco seats, we're allowed to have 5 seats. That's because you've got 4 seats in the back of the aircraft, and then you can actually sit someone in the co-pilot seat. That's just a thing that's true of aircraft that don't require 2 pilots. If we were to go with business class seating, we would only fit 3 in, or 3 first class seating, because there's just not enough room in the aircraft to fit those additional seats in. So these are all basic information that we can look at to judge whether or not this aircraft's okay for us. We have some pictures down here. We can check compatible add-ons to tell us whether or not it's compatible, and we can click the source button if there's one that we could download. In this instance, you can see that Bonanza G36 Hosobo is highlighted in green because that's the one it's detected as having loaded in the simulator. So we know already that this aircraft is known by OnAir. There may be an instance where you try to load an aircraft that OnAir doesn't recognize. If it doesn't, it will ask you to do import flight so that it can check the aircraft and the details. You perform a little flight, it goes into our system, and then the team will be able to check that there's nothing overly cheaty or wrong with the aircraft add-on that you're using. But for now, let's not worry about that. We're sticking with an aircraft that's part of the default sim sets, so OnAir naturally knows it. Economic details will give us a breakdown of how much money we can expect to earn potentially, and the trade-offs between rental, lease, and purchasing. I'm not going to go through that in detail. It's up to you if you want to judge through that. And you can see stats from all players who've been using this aircraft to see generally how the aircraft has been performing. But we're not going to worry too much about that either. What we're worried about is this button here, the green button that says display, sell, rent, and lease offers. So I'm going to click this, and it's going to say AET is not available in your simulator. The reason it's come up with AET is because, according to Microsoft Flight Simulator, that's the nearest airport to where we are. That's obviously complete nonsense, so I'm going to change that to EGCC, and I'm going to say search aircraft database. And here we go. It's going to find everything that's within 100 nautical miles of that airport. Now, unfortunately, there is no aircraft of that type at Manchester. So the nearest one here is 66 miles away, up to 111 miles away. So I can't really just jump into it and away I go. So I'm going to get something that's not at my airport. Now, I can see a list of details here, how many hours it's done. So in this case, I want an aircraft that's preferably under 10,000 hours. Having an aircraft that's over its use time does not mean you can't use it. It just means that it will wear out faster because it's an older aircraft and it's seen a lot of use. 10,000 is about right for a single engine, and you can see some are above, some are below. So I can use that. I can see the condition of the airframe overall and the condition of the engine itself. I can see how many hours before it's due a 100-hour inspection. And I can see what airport it's currently at, how far away that is, how much it sells for, and how much it rents for. So if something is blank, like here, there's no sell price here, there's no rent price, it means it's not available for sale. It's just not, they're not willing to sell it, or it's not available for rent, they're not willing to rent it. If I want to sort of filter this list, there's these little funnels next to things. So I'm going to rent, I'm not going to buy outright. So I'm going to go rent, I'm going to hit the filter there, I'm going to select all, and I'm going to untick 0. And when I do that, it won't show me anything that's not available for rent. So I have my options here, and I'm thinking this one is probably the best one overall. And when I click it, it will bring up some details on the right. And I can see that it's 97% condition. It's 679 hours on the engine. It's not due for an overhaul yet. The engine's about 93 out of 100% condition. The registration number, how many hours the airframe's actually gone through, how much fuel is already in the aircraft. Some general cost informations. Now, there's a couple of things to pay attention to. You don't want to be renting an aircraft that's close to 100-hour inspection, and you don't want to be renting an aircraft that's close to its annual inspection. When you rent, you're not eligible to actually pay for those, but it does mean you're going to have to get rid of the aircraft and rent something else so that the owner can go ahead and do the inspections and things in the background. We can see that's owned by the system in this case. So system just means it's a default aircraft generated by OnAir. It's not owned by a specific player. We can see its default layout of seats. So it's currently just got the eco seat layout, the default aircraft layout. And then we have our options. So we can see that we have 170,000 in cash, and we can see that the dry rent is 480 an hour, and the renting bond is 4,800. Now, what a renting bond is, essentially, it's you putting insurance down against screwing the aircraft up. So as long as you return the aircraft in decent condition, you will get your renting bond back. It's only held in escrow, and it's normally 10 hours worth of rent. So I could rent it. I would have to pay 4,800 up front, and then I would pay 480 for every flight hour that I use. And then when I return it, I'll get this 4,800 back. I could also lease. Now, again, this doesn't appear on all aircraft. But what a lease is you're paying essentially a weekly lease, and that's a real world week. So I have 2640 as the option on leasing. If I was to do that, I would have to pay 3 weeks in advance, so 3 times this number. And the minimum lease time is 4 weeks. Generally, you only want to pick that if you know you're going to be using the aircraft for any length of time. And obviously, you don't want to be picking a long lease if you're going to get rid of the aircraft before it's due, because you're going to have to pay the termination charge, and that's going to be quite expensive, potentially. However, longer leases do reduce the actual weekly cost. You get a discount up to 20% for a 48-week lease. I'm going to stick with rent for now. So I'm going to say rent, and it's going to pop up this box. So rent aircraft, November 1336 Bravo, which is a Bonanza G36 for 480 credits an hour and a daily minimum of 1 hour. So what happens here is if I don't fly an aircraft, then it's not going to accrue its minimum hours, and I'm going to be forced to pay this rent anyway, just for the fact that I'm holding on to it. On Thunder, there are no minimums, just because you can't use AI. However, on other worlds, it's kind of an expectation that you keep the aircraft busy. If you can't fly it personally, you can always get an AI to fly it so that it's still making money. At the end of the rental, has to be returned to the current airport with at least the same fuel level. If you don't do that, you'll get deductions from your bond to pay for an AI pilot to fly it back and tank it up. 4,800 up front, you'll get it back at the end. And then I have this tick box. Teleport my pilot to the aircraft location and generate a return job. This is available on all worlds for your first ever aircraft. So it's only available for your first ever aircraft. But we're going to use this right now. So because our pilot is currently at EGCC, however, this aircraft is actually at a different location. It's at EGCK, which is about 76 miles away. I don't really want to wait for my pilot to get a buzz over there. So I want to teleport there, and I want to have a job ready and waiting for me to fly back to EGCC. So I'm going to leave this enabled. The seats configuration, I can pick from some presets here. So all economy, all business, all first class, no seats whatsoever if you're just going to try and carry cargo, or custom. So if I say no seats at all, it's going to leave the aircraft with no seats, 0 out of 5 seats, 0 occupied service, but I get a £315 bonus cargo capacity. Essentially, every seat you remove is worth about £60 of weight. So it means the aircraft could carry more payload because I'm not carrying the actual seats around. I'm going to leave it at eco. So I've got 5 seats. I'm using 100% of the surface, and I don't get any extras. I'm going to go ahead and hit confirm. That's going to lock in our rent. I'm going to get charged the 4,800, and the aircraft is there. So I'm taken to my aircraft page. I can see here, there's the Bonanza G36. It's rented. There's some key stats about it, how much fuel it's got, and so on and so forth. And that's our aircraft locked in. It's also generated a starting job. So if I was to go back and look at my pending jobs, I can see here I have a starting job, and it's from where the aircraft is, EGCK, to my home base, EGCC. This is also a level mission, so you can tell because it has this trophy, so it gives a lot of extra XP. Level missions are generated automatically every time you level up. You get 1 per level. The first few levels, they are enough to get you to the next level. After that, it won't give you quite enough, but it will give you a significant boost. And they are generated based on the size of your aircraft in your fleet. So if you happen to have a bigger aircraft, you can hit regenerate if it's an existing one, or any new ones will generate based around that aircraft. But in this case, we're going to stick with this. It's not a bad job. It's going to pay us 11,000 up front. It's going to give us 1,000 XP, and it has no time limit. So this here says never expires. So we're free to fly that without any concerns. So join me next time, and we're going to do the flight preparation and get the flight done, and that will complete our first ever mission.